The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of the Henderson estate as Sarah's black sedan pulled into the circular driveway. She had left the office 3 hours earlier than usual, something that hadn't happened in over 2 years. The quarterly board meeting had been cancelled at the last minute, and for once, Sarah Henderson found herself with an unexpected gift of time. As the CEO of Henderson Industries, Sarah's days typically stretched from dawn until well past midnight. Her empire of tech companies and real estate developments demanded constant attention, leaving little room for anything resembling a personal life. At 38, she had built everything she had ever dreamed of, yet lately, she found herself wondering if she had somehow lost something important along the way. The driver held the door open as Sarah stepped out, her designer heels clicking against the pristine stone pathway. The house stood before her like a monument to success, all glass and steel rising against the California sky. She had purchased the property 5 years ago, drawn to its modern architecture and breathtaking views of the Pacific Ocean. It was everything she had wanted in a home, though she rarely spent enough time there to truly call it one. Sarah paused at the front entrance, fishing through her purse for keys she seldom used. Most days, she arrived home so late that Marcus, her live-in housekeeper and property manager, would already be gone for the evening. Today, however, she could hear sounds coming from somewhere beyond the front foyer. The soft echo of laughter drifted through the air, accompanied by what sounded like splashing water. Curiosity tugged at her as she stepped inside. The house felt different somehow, filled with an energy that seemed foreign yet strangely welcoming. Sarah set down her briefcase and kicked off her heels, patting silently across the cool marble in her stocking feet. The sounds were coming from the direction of the pool area, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a clear view of the backyard oasis. What she saw when she reached the living room made her freeze in place. There, by the edge of her pristine infinity pool, was Marcus. But he wasn't alone. A small child, perhaps 3 or 4 years old, stood beside him wearing nothing but swimming trunks and the biggest smile Sarah had ever seen. The little boy had Marcus's warm brown eyes and the same gentle curve to his smile. Marcus knelt beside a bright green bucket, his work clothes soaked with water and soap suds. In his hands, he held a small yellow sponge, which he was using to wash what appeared to be a collection of bath toys. The child giggled with pure delight as Marcus made silly voices for each toy, turning the simple act of cleaning into an elaborate performance. "Now this little duck," Marcus said in a high-pitched voice, holding up a rubber duck, "has been swimming all day and needs a good scrub behind his wings." The child erupted in laughter, clapping his small hands together. Sarah remained motionless, hidden behind the partially open sliding door. In all the years Marcus had worked for her, she had never seen him like this. The serious, efficient man who managed her household with military precision was gone, replaced by someone completely different. Someone who seemed to glow with genuine happiness. The child reached for the duck, his tiny fingers wrapping around it carefully. "My turn, Daddy," he said in a voice as sweet as honey. "I wash the duck now. Daddy." The word hit Sarah like a physical blow. Marcus had a son. She watched as Marcus guided the child's small hands, showing him how to gently clean the toy. The patience in his movements, the love in his voice as he praised every small effort, created a picture of tenderness that Sarah had never witnessed before. This wasn't the Marcus she knew from their brief, professional interactions. This was a father, completely devoted to his child's happiness. "That's perfect, Tommy," Marcus said softly, his voice thick with pride. "Look how clean you got him. Duck is going to be so happy." Tommy beamed up at his father, and Sarah felt something twist deep in her chest. When was the last time anyone had looked at her with such unconditional love? When was the last time she had felt the simple joy that seemed to radiate from this small scene? As she continued to observe, Sarah began to piece together details she had somehow missed over the years. The way Marcus sometimes seemed tired on Monday mornings. The careful way he scheduled his work around specific days and times. The occasional phone calls he took in hushed tones, always stepping away from wherever she might be. He had been protecting his private life, keeping his role as a father separate from his work. And Sarah realized she had never once asked him about his personal life. In 5 years of employing him, she had never inquired about his family, his hopes, or his dreams outside of managing her household. The realization settled over her like a heavy blanket. Here was a man who had worked faithfully for her, maintaining her home with dedication and care, while simultaneously raising a child on his own. She had never noticed the depth of his sacrifice or the fullness of his life beyond her walls. Tommy dropped his sponge into the bucket with a splash, sending water cascading over both himself and Marcus. Instead of scolding the child, Marcus laughed, a rich, genuine sound that seemed to make the entire space brighter. Oops, Tommy giggled, covering his mouth with both hands. Big splash, Marcus agreed, grinning. But you know what? Sometimes big splashes are the most fun. He cupped his hands, scooping up some of the soapy water, and let it trickle over Tommy's head like a gentle waterfall. The child squealed with delight, jumping up and down. Sarah found herself smiling, though tears had somehow gathered in her eyes. This was what happiness looked like. This was what love sounded like. And she was watching it unfold in her own backyard, performed by a man she had somehow failed to truly see until this moment. The business world that consumed her life suddenly felt very far away. The board meetings, the profit margins, the endless pursuit of growth and success, all seemed to pale in comparison to the simple, perfect moment playing out before her. Tommy's laughter was worth more than any contract she had ever signed, and Marcus's gentle devotion spoke to something she hadn't even realized she was missing. A memory surfaced unexpectedly. She was 6 years old, standing in her own family's backyard while her father pushed her on a swing. She could still remember the feeling of flying through the air, her father's hands steady and sure, his voice calling out encouragement. When had she stopped remembering that feeling? When had she stopped believing that such simple pleasures mattered? Marcus was now helping Tommy line up the clean toys along the edge of the pool, creating what appeared to be a parade of rubber ducks and boats. Each toy was positioned with the seriousness of a military operation, but the joy on both their faces made it clear this was the best kind of work. "Look, Daddy," Tommy said, pointing proudly at their arrangement. "All clean and happy. Just like you," Marcus replied, pulling the child into a gentle embrace. All clean and happy and perfect. The love in that simple gesture broke something open inside Sarah's chest. She had spent years building walls around her heart, convinced that emotional distance was the price of professional success. But watching Marcus with his son, she realized that perhaps she had gotten it all wrong. Perhaps the greatest success was not in what you built, but in who you loved and who loved you in return. Tommy yawned, a big, sleepy yawn that made Marcus chuckle softly. "Time for a nap, little man?" he asked, already reaching for a towel. "Not tired," Tommy protested, even as his eyes began to droop. "Of course not," Marcus agreed, wrapping the towel around his son's small shoulders. "But maybe the toys are tired. Maybe they need to rest after their big bath." Tommy considered this seriously, then nodded. "Okay. We let toys sleep." As Marcus gathered their supplies and scooped Tommy into his arms, Sarah quietly stepped back from the window. She didn't want to intrude on their private moment, didn't want to shatter the magic of what she had witnessed. Instead, she made her way to the kitchen, her mind spinning with new understanding. 20 minutes later, as she stood at the counter making tea, she heard soft footsteps on the marble floor. Marcus appeared in the doorway, looking startled to see her. "Ms. Henderson," he said, immediately straightening into his professional posture. "I wasn't expecting you home so early. I can have dinner prepared in." "Marcus," Sarah interrupted gently, turning to face him. "Please, sit down." Confusion flickered across his features, but he slowly took a seat at the kitchen island. Sarah poured 2 cups of tea, sliding one across the counter to him. "I saw you with your son," she said quietly. "Tommy." Marcus went very still, his hands wrapped around the warm mug. "I can explain," he began, but Sarah held up a hand. "You don't need to explain anything," she said. "I need to apologize." Now Marcus looked truly bewildered. "Apologize? For what?" "For never asking," Sarah said, feeling the weight of her words. "For never seeing you as a whole person with a life and responsibilities beyond this house. For never realizing that you've been balancing everything you do for me with being a father." She sat down across from him, suddenly aware of how long it had been since she had simply talked with another person, not at them or around them, but with them. "He's beautiful," she continued softly. "And the way you are with him, it's the most beautiful thing I've seen in a very long time." Marcus's eyes filled with surprise and something that might have been relief. "Thank you," he said quietly. He's everything to me. Where is he now? Napping in the guest room. I hope that's okay. My regular babysitter had an emergency, and I couldn't find anyone else on such short notice. I was going to leave early to take him home, but then I thought maybe if he stayed quiet. Marcus, Sarah said, her voice gentle but firm. This is terrible. He looked stricken, starting to stand. I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't have. No, Sarah said quickly. What's terrible is that you felt you had to hide him. That you felt you couldn't tell me you're a single father who sometimes needs flexibility. That you've been managing everything alone. Understanding dawned slowly across Marcus's face. I want you to bring Tommy here whenever you need to, Sarah continued. I want you to feel comfortable making this space work for both of your lives. And I want to know more about both of you, if you're willing to share. For a long moment, they sat in silence, the afternoon light streaming through the windows and painting everything in shades of gold. His mother died when he was 18 months old, Marcus said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Cancer. I've been raising him alone since then. Sarah felt her heart break for this man who had carried such pain while maintaining such grace. I'm so sorry. Some days are harder than others, Marcus admitted. But he's taught me what really matters. Every day with him is a gift. You're an extraordinary father, Sarah said, and meant it completely. And an extraordinary man. I should have seen that before now. A small voice called out from somewhere in the house. Daddy, where are you? Marcus smiled, the tension leaving his shoulders. That's Tommy. He doesn't like waking up in strange places. Go get him, Sarah said. Bring him here. I'd like to meet him properly. When Marcus returned a few minutes later, Tommy was rubbing his eyes with small fists, his hair sticking up in every direction. He looked around the kitchen with curious eyes before his gaze settled on Sarah. Tommy, Marcus said gently, this is Ms. Henderson. She owns this house. Tommy studied Sarah seriously, then gave her a small wave. Hi, he said shyly. Hello, Tommy, Sarah replied, her voice softer than it had been in years. I saw how well you helped your daddy clean those toys. You did a wonderful job. Tommy's face lit up with pride. We made them all clean and happy. I saw that. They looked very happy indeed. As the three of them sat in the kitchen, sharing simple conversation and watching Tommy nibble on crackers, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in years: contentment. Not the sharp satisfaction of closing a deal or the adrenaline rush of success, but a quiet, steady sense of rightness. Later that evening, after Marcus had taken Tommy home, Sarah stood alone in her beautiful, empty house. But it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like a place where love could live, where laughter could echo, where the most important moments weren't about business or achievement but about connection and care. The next morning, Sarah made a decision that would have seemed impossible just days before. She called her assistant and cleared her schedule for the afternoon. Then she drove to a toy store and spent an hour selecting books and games appropriate for a 3-year-old boy. When Marcus arrived for work, he found Sarah in the kitchen with coffee brewing and a spread of new toys arranged on the counter. I was thinking, she said as he stared in amazement, maybe Tommy would like to spend more time here. And maybe you could teach me how to make that voice you do for the rubber duck. Marcus's smile was brighter than the California sunshine streaming through the windows. I think Tommy would like that very much. As they prepared for Tommy's arrival, Sarah realized that sometimes the most important discoveries happen not in boardrooms or corner offices, but in your own backyard, when you finally stop moving fast enough to see what's been there all along. The heart of home, she had learned, wasn't in the architecture or the amenities. It was in the laughter that filled the spaces, the love that connected the people within those walls, and the moments of pure joy that transformed a house into something infinitely more precious. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, you got a second chance to build that home, one rubber duck and one small giggle at a time.